This is the Special Needs Mama in Business podcast. My mission is to empower you to advocate for your special needs child from a place of hope. I do that by sharing stories of other families that have been on this road before you, discussing alternative therapies, and talking about how you can have the time and money you need to care for your child by owning a business. Are you ready? Let's go! Hi, this is Nicole from Moms of Heart, your host today on the Special Needs Mama in Business podcast. Today we are talking about that dirty word, money. And I don't know if your household growing up was like my household, but the two things we didn't ever talk about was sex and money. We talked about politics and we talked about religion, but we did not talk about sex and money. On this podcast, we're still probably not going to talk too much about sex, but we will talk about money. And mostly because, one, I feel like a lot of my financial struggles today are because we didn't talk about it growing up, but also because I feel like now, at least in the special needs community, most of the time when I hear people talk about money, it's like with all these limiting beliefs. I just want to ask you to have a little bit of an open mind going into this, mostly because I thought there was no way out of our situation. And then when I realized there was, I was like, holy crap, why didn't anyone ever tell me that? Let's just jump in. We're going to dive deep into how we got into the position that we're in and have been in, and how we're digging out of it, and how maybe that might give you some hope and ideas on how you can either prevent being in a situation that we've been in by being really proactive, or if you're in a similar situation as us, hopefully this will inspire you to find some ways out of it yourself. The main thing that just really concerns me is it seems to be a super common thing that disability of anybody in the family in our society, I guess probably in most societies, but that automatically indicates that you're going to have a lesser financial status because that healthcare is so crazy expensive. And there's ways around that aren't talked about enough. Either you end up in the welfare system and then you're almost scared to work out of it because you know that once you get to private insurance and having earning an income, you lose that assistance, but you're not making enough to be in a better situation. And you're almost in a worse position, which is often the case I hear. So people are scared to make a difference in their situation, or they're they have a decent job, they have decent insurance, but the co-pays are just crazy and killing them. So again, I just want to talk through these things and hopefully this will give you some ideas. Please know I am not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. So none of this is legal advice. None of this is tax advice. None of this is business advice. This is just our situation. And if there's something in here that sparks an idea for you, please check with your professional, appropriate professional, to be sure that everything that you want to do is legal. This is not legal advice, just to be really clear. Okay, diving in after all of those disclaimers. We started off in marriage in a decent spot. Granted, we had the complications of that John was an immigrant and he had just finished his second bachelor degree. So he has 2 bachelor's degrees in theology related fields. And the plan was for him to get a job as a pastor. And so he was wrapping up a couple of things along with that while we were working on his green card status, which he couldn't work during that time. He kept himself busy and was studying and doing that kind of a thing. And then 9 months into marriage, we finally got the green card situation so he could finally get a job. And so he just got a job somewhere while we worked on finding him a job as a pastor. So we had and I was a nurse at that point. So decent income. We were making things work. The problem was, I talked about in episode 2, I've had chronic illness for a really long time. And so medical bills were just piling up, and was still figuring out, cause when I was on my parents' insurance, they also paid most of those co-pays, and we often hit max out of pocket because of my dad's health. I wasn't used to having to figure out paying my insurance premium. And again, we didn't talk about money, so I didn't know how to budget for those things. And then even still, it was just so much money. And so it just piled up really quickly. And I just didn't have the financial skills, I guess, to deal with it. And then John had some issues, and he wasn't on insurance at the time, or he did, but I don't remember the situation exactly, but he quickly got quite a few bills as well. And it was just like, okay, we can't cope with this anymore. I don't know what we're going to do. Like we were in a really, really big mess. And some of the cost of his immigration contributed to that financial mess. We decided that we were going to move to Utah because where we were at, like there was a very limited number of jobs and there was a limited number of housing. So like we couldn't find any place cheaper to live, and to get a higher income or something like that, we couldn't find. And we knew we were going to have to move anyways for him to find a job. And so we thought, well, moving to Utah, like there might be some more opportunities there. So we moved and he found a job in car sales. So please note, like he has 2 bachelor's degrees and he cannot find a job in his field, which is kind of crazy to me. And I had a couple like competing offers for nursing, but I was still actually taking a pay cut. And we ended up not being able to find a place cheaper to live than what we had been living in. And it ended up increasing by like $300 a month. So our cost of living increased. I guess we didn't do our research very well in that whole process. But we clicked, like, even with his better paying job that he'd found in car sales, we still weren't doing well, and we decided that the best solution was to file bankruptcy just so that all that medical debt could go away and we could start from scratch. Because our healthcare was in a better position at that point. We had gotten really, really good health insurance and our premiums weren't super high, and we were really low copays, really low deductibles, because we knew like we keep having issues, so we need to have good insurance. So we're like, okay, we're in a better place. Stuff just kept happening. He ended up not continuing to work for that place anymore after a lot of months of like 70-hour work weeks and bringing home like $400. Like it was crazy, partly because he's too ethical to be a car salesman. Duh, like pastors don't become car salesmen. So yeah, that didn't go well for him. Then he just really struggled to find any kind of work. He just really struggled. And I had switched and I had found a job that I enjoyed and was paying close to what I was making in Washington before we moved, but our cost of living was so much higher. So even though we had gotten rid of all the debt, we still just weren't in a great place, especially because now John was unemployed. So like the mess just kind of kept getting bigger. And then when we found out we were pregnant with Henry, John had just gotten another job. So we were like, okay, great. Like we're in a really good place. We're going to be okay. And then 3 months into the pregnancy, he got laid off. And we're like, crap, he already has such a hard time finding a job. And now we're pregnant. And then like right after that was when we found out about Henry's diagnosis. You know, he's going to have all these open heart surgeries and be medically fragile. And so we have to be living in a really good environment, like stable environment, to be able to handle all this with him. And I'm not gonna be able to work. I can't work and handle all this and like be with him in the hospital and pumping and all that stuff. And so we're just like, what are we gonna do? I can't tell you how many nights I spent crying for months, crying myself to sleep, just terrified that CPS was gonna take him from the hospital because we were gonna end up being homeless. And like, that's how bad it was. Financially, we were just in a mess. My mom had been paying our rent. We were doing our very best and it just wasn't working. I'm going to interrupt myself really quick. I'm editing this and I realize I'm making it sound like I feel like all of our financial problems are my mom's fault. And that's not true. She was a big influencer in a lot of the choices I made early on in my adult life. But a lot of the other influencers, like college counselors and the culture at large, all were communicating that same message. And additionally, even if we were able to get that good job or get those good jobs, then we have the other issue we're going to talk about in just a little bit, where maybe we have insurance that's covering things, but it's not enough to cover all the copays and deductibles of a medical crisis, which is kind of what we're talking about in this community, where you have a child who is medically fragile and so has tons of medical bills. So that's kind of all the issues wrapped up into this that we're talking about. I just want to be really clear. I don't blame my mom. It was more the voice, and I guess I'm encompassing that in my mom, but she was just one of the many voices that were telling me these things about how money works. And it wasn't even really specifically how money works. It was more like how life works. And then I got into adulting and realized that's not always true. And I think a lot of millennials are discovering this. And this is why so many millennials are now living at home in this economy where inflation has risen like crazy and income hasn't changed. Okay, back to what I was saying. I grew up being told that you go to school, you get good grades, and then you get a good job and you're fine. The problem is with that theory, if your health doesn't allow you to work that job, you're screwed. If you can't find a job, you're screwed. And in today's economy, like that's a reality. In the economy of like when my mom graduated from college and that's where she's like giving me this advice from, that really wasn't a thing. Like it wasn't that hard to find a good paying job. But that's not the reality, which I think generally our society is aware of that problem now. But here we are with like all the student loan debt. Fortunately, John doesn't have any student loan debt, but I do. And we can't decent, reliable work that I can do like throughout all this. So we tried looking for like telecommuting jobs that maybe I could do from the hospital. Like we tried everything. Couldn't find a job for John. I think he's been on probably over 30 interviews, applied for probably 100 to 150 jobs. No joke. He has tried. We were in just such a bad situation at that point. And so we knew we needed to be with family and like move in with family. Otherwise, CPS would take him because we'd be living out of our car. We were just really hoping that someone would offer to take us in. And my mom eventually did. And she's in Houston next to Texas Children. So that was a really easy, obvious answer because then we're moving to a center that's even better equipped to handle his diagnosis and everything. That situation was able to be resolved. And we had the time and luxury of time to be able to take the time we needed with him at the hospital and focus on him and focus on ourselves and get things stable. But then as that started to resolve, we were still in this position where like if anything went wrong, if we had to do another hospitalization because the cost of food at the hospital and everything, then we're always having to ask people for money to like to help support, pay for Chick-fil-A all the time, you know, that you're having to eat at the hospital. That's so expensive. The little bit of state aid that we were getting and the little bit that my parents were able to help out with in addition to taking us in, it wasn't enough. We were just always having to ask for help and I hated it. I hated every single time that I had to post on Facebook, like, okay, we're in another pickle. I just want to stand on my own 2 feet. I just want to be okay. I just want to be able to earn a living on my own and like not just be enough for our family, but I want to be in a place where I see others in need and be able to be generous to them. So this was just like getting more and more passionate within me, but I still didn't know how to fix that problem. We had been sold the idea of real estate is a really great way to have passive income where we could have some of that time and money. And when we had time, we could work. But then if we didn't have time, like we'd still get a steady income or having some kind of business. But real estate kind of made sense to us. The problem was with real estate, you have to have money to really get started. Even if anybody says, no, you don't. No, you do. You have to have money to get started. So we tried getting creative with that because we were really certain that real estate was the answer for us. So I spent days on Craigslist trying to find a real estate investor that I could intern for. And I was, even if they only pay us a little, the experience that we'd get, and then maybe they'd partner with us on a deal if they saw that we were trustworthy, or maybe we could put some sweat equity in. And so I was just trying to get really creative. And we did find somebody who let us work with him for a little while. And we quickly found out that his ethics were garbage. And we were naive enough to think that just because his ethics with tenants was bad, that he would be ethical with us. But that wasn't the case. And so that was kind of a dramatic ending to that relationship. Business lesson learned. If someone is unethical in one area, they're most likely going to be unethical in every area. So get out as soon as you discover that. Lesson 1 learned. But then also, that was when we came to the conclusion of legitimately, we are not going to be able to find people to work with in real estate that will work with us and take us seriously unless we have money to put on the table, skin to put in the game. We decided, okay, we're going to table the idea of real estate. We still think it's a good plan. It's still one of the many streams of income we'd like to establish in our 10-year plan, but maybe that isn't the plan right now. Even since like right when I got diagnosed with Henry, I had wanted to start a podcast and a blog because I saw this vacancy in the community, which is rapidly being filled. I'm surprised every day by how many mom bloggers are starting in the CHD community. And I'm discovering ones in the special need community, but At the time, I just wanted to find a blog post of what do I pack to take to the hospital when I'm about to have a baby with CHD. You know, those things you search for on Pinterest. I couldn't find any of those that were applicable to my situation. And so that was something that I wanted to do, but I felt like I couldn't start doing it until I had the experience to speak to those things. Now looking back, I wish I had just done it, because now I've been through those things, but the emotions aren't raw, they aren't real, and my memory fails me a little bit in trying to remember some of that because I blocked it out. So I wish I hadn't taken so long to get started, but I'm glad I've gotten started now. And it took me a long time to really figure out how to monetize what I was doing. But that was essentially what it was. October, November that we worked with the real estate investor, and I started the blog in February. So it took me still a little bit. It took me a while to get going with that, but we finally did get it going. Part of that was because we were in the hospital again with Henry when he got RSV in December. And then we're recovering from that and getting reacclimated again to life. Launched the blog in February, and I shortly after launched my first product. And I had a few sales, but it wasn't stellar. And I got some affiliate deals, but because I had no traffic and I wasn't quite sure how to get that traffic, I didn't really do anything with it at the time. I had these ideas of how to get moving forward, but I was also very stuck. And I knew that my struggle with it was mostly because of my ability. Social media marketing those skills were super lacking, and I wanted training in that was more specific than like a podcast or like a free training. I needed more specific mentorship, but I wasn't in a place to afford it. When my friend Leanna pitched me the idea of working with her with Arbonne, she has they do specifically social media marketing with Arbonne, and they have mentors that coach the whole team. So you can get one-on-one mentorship with the mentors, and you have to pay for that, but you get a lot of other coaching and mentorship that you just get for free because you're a part of the team. And so she said that might be really beneficial. I have been using Arbonne products for decades, and I actually been a consultant with them before, but just didn't feel the business plan is great. It was just more the activity of the business that I don't really love that. Having parties or, begging your friends to buy things. I think kind of the stereotypical concept of network marketing. That's what my team did before. And she's like, no, we're a different team. We do things differently. Please come try. I did. And there's aspects that are definitely very different. There's some aspects that are still very much the same, but I did get a lot of the training that I needed to understand how social media marketing works, some of the mindset issues that I was struggling with, in addition to overcoming the obstacles that I was experiencing for my blog business. I was then now also creating this other stream of income through Arbonne. And so then we kind of solved two birds with one stone of getting another stream of income that's been really helpful. It's been a couple $100s a month. And then also the skill training thing that I needed, we were able to do that too. That was in March of this year. So then we spent half of May in Utah. Struggled with some of those things, but still really didn't make a lot of progress. But then when we got back, I've just been going gangbusters with everything. About to relaunch my product that I had launched back in March with my blog, and the money now works. It makes sense. And it's going to be I think bring our family to a point of being able to have a traditional income. Additionally, it's increasing our following on a regular basis with social media and our email list and all that kind of stuff, which then makes those affiliate deals and the sponsorships that I had worked out before, or I have some pending, those now make sense because now I have the audience to do it. So that's kind of our history of how we got to this point. The thing I really want to talk about is I hear all the time on social media, especially in the special needs community, is the G-tube groups and the CHD groups and all these groups that I'm in. I keep hearing the same excuses that we were making ourselves of we can't get a job, we're unemployed, we're not making enough money, our deductibles are so high, we're in this terrible situation and we're so stressed out about it. But no one says well, then do something about it. And I feel just coming in hot on a group feed like that to someone I don't know maybe isn't the most appropriate, because I can't give you all this background of we've been there. We've been in the worst of it. And the only way out, getting another job that pays you more money isn't the way out. Getting better insurance isn't a way out. When you think about, okay, what are practical, realistic solutions? And a lot of the problem is you can save money, you can pay off debt. Those are all going to help your cash flow situation, but they're not going to help your income situation. And that's really the problem that ultimately needs to be addressed. And you need, if you're a special needs parent, you absolutely must have at least one or two sources of income that are passive. Meaning, if your child suddenly needs like a heart transplant and you're going to be in the hospital for 6 months with them, or heaven forbid, your child passes away, you need a plan so that you don't have to go back to work right away, or that you could take 6 months off and you could be there with your child the way you want to be. Because I know if my son was in the position where he needed a heart transplant, the very last thing I ever want to do is to leave him in the hospital to go to work. And I don't know a single parent who is like super content with that concept. Please, please hear me. If you are a parent of a child who could ever need anything like that, who could ever be in a position where that's honestly most parents, but specifically if your child is at a higher risk for anything like that, then you need to listen to this. You need a source of passive income so that if that happens, you're prepared and you don't have to depend on other people to pay your bills. Because let me tell you, it's a stressful enough situation to have to be in the hospital with your kid. And the last thing you want to worry about is losing your house because you can't pay your mortgage, or having to ask people for money. Like, that is the worst feeling in the world. Now, don't get me wrong. It's the absolute best feeling in the world when you receive that money. Like, that receiving that generosity, I think, is amazing. And it's so humbling, and that's great. But you need to have a plan in place so you're not dependent on that, because the desperation of like just praying someone is going to give that's a thing. It doesn't balance out. So let's talk about some practical plans of coming up with that passive income. So we talked with Summer on episode 11 about vacation rentals, and she even does coaching with that. So if that's something that you're like, I could legit do that, maybe even not being like the owner of vacation rentals, but starting a business where you're cleaning vacation rentals, like she does all those things. So if that's something that jumps out at you. But then there's also all these other ways that maybe they're not passive income, but they're the beginnings of taking ownership of your income. So driving for Uber or Lyft, being a pet sitter with Rover, running errands with any of the millions of apps that do that, or like food delivery or grocery delivery, or like there's all these different things now of ways that you can become an independent contractor. And really what that does is, no, it doesn't create passive income because you're still trading time for money, but you're taking ownership of your income, meaning that you aren't dependent on an employer to tell you when you can and can't work or how much you can or can't make. And it gets you thinking in the mindset of how can I make more money? So ultimately, the point is you want to situate yourself in a position where you have a business, you have ownership of your income. This means, one, you're not dependent on somebody else to say when or when you can't work or how much you can't work. But then it also puts you in a position where like your tax status is different, because if you go work overtime at your W-2 job, that changes your tax bracket. But if you have a side hustle, that may change your tax bracket. But if you have a really good accountant who works with you on making sure that you're utilizing all the possible deductions available, it may not. Or if it does, like then you're in a good place. But usually if you have a good accountant, because if you're utilizing your tax deductions properly, you're not paying as much in taxes. Typically, for a W-2 type of job, you're paying like 30% in taxes. If you have a good accountant for your business, you're paying more like 10, maybe 20%, maybe less. So you want to work with a good accountant who knows essentially they pay for themselves in the way that they do the deductions, not unethically. Obviously, you want someone who gets your deductions in an ethical manner. Otherwise, you're creating a whole new mess. But I'm going to see if I can't I've been working on it, but try and get my accountant on this podcast and see if we can't chat about that a little bit further. All that to say, you definitely want to start a business. So now you're thinking, okay, great, I want to start a business, but I don't have money to start a business, which was legit the issue we had, which was why we worked with the crazy real estate investor that we've learned lots of lessons from. So then we started a business with Rover.com, pet sitting, because that basically was like just sweat equity starting. It cost me like $25 to do a background check. And then I had a source of steady leads for my business as an independent contractor. That business has grown to the point that now we're hiring help. So that has been a huge thing, and also just really beneficial for my mindset about how I look at business, and like really practical ways to look at how I do my marketing and how I'm professional and how I do my customer service and some of those other skills that are required in having these other kinds of businesses. But the problem with something like that is that you are trading time for money. It wasn't our long-term solution, but it was a good right now solution. So then we expanded it into the blog and the podcast, and there's a lot of benefits of passive income there. But the problem with those is my startup costs, again, are super low. I think my startup costs were somewhere around, because I already had like a lot of the tools I needed. I had a computer, I had a camera, I had a phone, all that stuff. So it was more just like reutilizing things that I owned personally for the business to be able to start making this income. I had to pay for like my domain name and hosting fees and that kind of thing, but it was maybe $120 or so to get started. I still haven't invested in any equipment for the podcast. I probably would like appreciate if I did. I promise as soon as we get some more income coming in from the podcast, that will happen so that we can improve the quality of the audio you are listening to right now. But ultimately, you have to just be really smart about making sure that your startup costs are low. So if you're in a position where you don't have money to invest into something like real estate or buying a franchise or like one of these other big ways to start a business, or maybe you have some dream, some passion within you that you really want to do, but the startup cost is stopping you, look for some other way that you could, like, maybe it's not something you're super passionate about. I mean, I like dogs, but it's not my heart's full desire to be a pet sitter for the rest of my life. I really enjoy spending time with dogs, and I'm decent at it because I guess all it really takes to be decent at being a pet sitter is to show up and like be okay with dogs. But you know, like there's more, it's not that hard, but I have more within me that I want to do and create. So that's kind of my point, is like, I have all these big passions and these big dreams, but I can't start there. So I have to start with what I have and what's in front of me. And so that's where you have to start looking. Like, don't get hung up on the fact that you can't do your big dream now. Look at what's in front of you, what's available to you. So ideas that are like really low startup costs that get to money quickly. It's those things like Rover, Uber, those kinds of things where an independent contractor, a lot of times things with direct sales, or like network marketing. That's my Arbonne business. If you want to reach out to me and chat a little bit more about what that looks like in that business opportunity, I'd love to talk with you about that. But maybe, like health and wellness isn't something that you're like, I can jump on board with that. Look at other companies, but be sure that you really look at their compensation plan, because some compensation plans are designed to make the whole situation be super spammy. And I know that's like the thing that like drives people away from network marketing. I don't feel like Arbonne's compensation plan encourages that in any way. It actually like discourages being spammy, because the only way you really benefit in building a team is if they actually like start a business and do well. Whereas some companies, they're like, they monetize like just getting people to sign up, and you don't really care if they do well or not, because you're paid for getting them to sign up. So there's like things like that you want to look at, of like, what are they incentivizing in the compensation plan, and how does that make you move forward? So a book that really goes into like, how do you look at compensation plans is Robert Kiyosaki's Business of the 21st Century. I'll list that in the show notes. But that's a really good book by, I feel like, someone really respectable, like Robert Kiyosaki from Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like, he's like a New York Times bestselling author, and he talks about money from a lot of different perspectives, but specifically in this way, you need to take ownership of your money. And the only way that you're going to be not in a position where you're in a financial catastrophe every time your kid gets sick is be like taking control of this. And so he talks about that in all of his books in some degree, maybe not like from the special needs parenting perspective, but more about the like being smart about your money perspective. When you are looking at like maybe a network marketing company, like, and some of them, their startup costs are not cheap. They're more like starting a franchise. So you also need to look at that. Arbonne's, I don't think I can say numbers on here because they change. It's a really small fee to get started, like less than $100. And then you buy your initial product, which was just going to be product that you use, which you need to use it to know like that you can sell it to other people. And that's I'll just say it's within our budget. And I think we kind of have established that our budget is pretty low. Yeah, if you want to reach out and chat about that further, I'd love to. But a multi-level marketing company, even if you're not good at sales, is a legit thing, because I think if you think I'm not good at sales, maybe you should look into what sales is, because it's not about being spammy or pushy. And actually, like, I really discourage that, because it gives the whole industry a bad rap. I feel like more it's just finding people who are looking for the thing you have. So when I am finding team members, I'm looking for people who want to start, like, have this same situation where they want a stream of passive income, and they want to do it in a way that's not spammy. They want to do it in a way that, like, they don't have to put down a whole lot of startup costs. Like, they're wanting the same thing. And it's like, okay, well, here, this is what I have. And that's like a perfect fit. Or like if they're wanting to lose weight and they're wanting to do it in a way that they don't have to spend a ton of time in the kitchen, and they can eat really clean and figure out food allergy issues, establish a healthy habit pattern around food. Great, I can help you with that with the products that we have with our brand, because that's how I've lost weight, and that's how I've figured out my issues with food, and how I figured out that I'm dairy and gluten intolerant. I'm more finding people who are actually looking for the thing I want. And if you aren't looking for it and you're curious about it, I'll let you know. But if you say, that's not for me right now, cool. Well, now you know what I do. And if that changes, let me know, but I'm not going to pester you about it. I know different people have different approaches, but that's mine. If you are interested, then I'm interested. And I feel like that's how it should be. So if you're like, no, I'm not good at sales, well, then find a team that doesn't do sales in the way that you're thinking. Ours does social media marketing, which means, like, if you're looking for me, then I'm looking for you. But if you're not, then I'm not going to be all over your case. I feel like network marketing is a very viable option when you're talking about building a passive stream of income. Because I have to tell you, it's the coolest thing to wake up in the morning to check my email and find out that I have a $100 payment on the way because someone made an order while I was sleeping. It's just the coolest thing. That's a viable option. The independent contractors is a viable option. And then creating your own product. So writing a book, maybe there's some medical device or some kind of associated medical device. I've seen a lot of special needs parents come up with these kinds of things. And honestly, with 3D printing and the like abilities in manufacturing now, how they have changed and come so far, it's really not that hard to come up with your own product. That's a legit possibility to do. And there's so much free information about how to go about doing that and to bring a product to market. So maybe you have a tube feeding kid and there's this like specific way that you want to be able to set up the supplies in your car, and there is no device to do that. Go make it and go sell it. And then now you have a stream of income. You have to kind of think practical things like that. Network marketing, independent contractor of some sort. And that can be freelancing too. I didn't mention that, but like maybe you're freelancing in copywriting or freelancing in something else. That might be a little bit harder to get started because now you're having to market yourself too. But it's a way to more specifically take control of your situation. Whereas like with Rover, because I get leads constantly from Rover, I don't have to do my own marketing. I just have to have like a decent profile up, and I get really good ratings. And so that just is a natural builder. I don't have to do a ton of marketing for it. But as a copywriter, you're going to have to work a little harder to find your clients, at least at the beginning, or like a photographer or, any of those kinds of things. And you are trading your time for money, but it's that same situation like our business with Rover, where you can get to the point where you're too busy to do it and you can hire people on to help you. And then that starts to be more of that passive income where someone else is going out and doing the work. Now, there's a lot of complexities that go into that of making sure that you're hiring someone who knows what they're doing and does work to the level that you would do it yourself, and that they don't, ruin your reputation. But that's a piece of that. Talk about network marketing, real estate. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can get involved in real estate. And I would strongly suggest not purchasing any kind of education if that's something that you're just beginning to explore. But listen to things like Bigger Pockets, or like the Bigger Pockets podcast is really great because they talk about all the different kinds of real estate and what that looks like. And you could hear different stories and kind of see like what sparks your interest without investing a ton of money up front, only to get into it and go like, okay, I do not want to do this. So I would strongly recommend starting in that direction. And then once you get into it, if you're like, okay, no, I need like more deeper training, someone to really tell me, like walk me through what this looks like, then I actually have some good resources for like, if you want to do like buy and hold or flips or anything like that, I do have some good resources for paid training for real estate. If you're curious, let me know, drop me a message on social media or whatever, but I wouldn't start there if this is something that you're just exploring. But that is a legit way to get some passive income. And then there's also, that you can buy a franchise and all that kind of stuff. But I would feel like, I feel like in this realm, in this conversation, probably the majority of you are not in a financial position where you could go buy a franchise and start a business in that way, in that capacity. And you also have to be really careful in that sense to not just be creating a job for yourself. And I feel like that's the case with most of these things. You could do, create your own product, but then rather than hiring help to do things that other people are good at, keep yourself in the middle of things and then end up working 70 hours a week, making the same amount of money and not actually create passive income, but instead you've created a job for yourself. So that's something that you definitely have to be careful about in any of these things, about really being smart about how you delegate and how you build. So the 4-Hour Work Week is a really good resource for that. And then, and that's a book. I think Pat Flynn's podcast really to help you really get the juices flowing on, is this a good viable option, or what other options are out there? Maybe some of the things I have said have struck a chord with you, but you're I don't really resonate with any of these things specifically. He goes into so many other options. He has other guests on the show. There's a whole bunch of other podcasts about side hustles where they have a lot of different people come in and talk about their side hustles. And some of them I'm man, that is genius. I don't have any skills or anything in that arena that would be of interest to me. But I think that's so cool that you can build a full-time income doing some random thing because you found the right clientele. So I think a really other way to look at it is in that freelancing concept. What skills do you have that are valuable to other people? And what's a way that you could offer that to them? Starting your own marketing agency, if you're really good at social media marketing, the copywriting. There was one that was I listened to on a Side Hustle podcast where they were talking about this girl who was really good. She was an artist. She was trying to get her art to sell and was struggling. And someone asked her to work at a carnival and do some caricatures. And she was okay, sure, whatever. And it didn't pay very well, but she did amazing. And then a whole bunch of other people were oh, can you come do this for me? And so now she does all these events where she draws caricatures, and she was able to quit her full-time job and just do this thing where every weekend she goes, draws caricatures, and that's all she does. Crazy, the different ideas that people come up with that you can create a side hustle that turns into a legitimate business that establishes this thing that we're talking about of having some passive income and setting yourself up for a financial future that if the worst happens, you are braced for impact. I would just really love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Are you braced for impact? Are you prepared financially for when those things happen? Do you have questions about this? Do you have concerns about this? I'd love to do more episodes like this where we dive into some of these topics and answer some of your questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to message me on Facebook or Instagram. But also another really fun way to submit your questions, because then I can play them on the podcast, is if you take a voice memo on your phone and you email it to me at Nicole@momsofheart.com. And then we can do a question and answer episode where we talk about some of these money concepts, and I'll play your question with your voice and then be able to answer it it just kind of is a fun little thing to do. So if you have some questions that you would like to submit that way, I'd love to hear them and answer them. And then also just moving forward to clarify kind of the structure of this podcast as I've been doing it a little bit and getting some more clarity about how I want to move things forward. In my mission, I talk about in the opening segment that we're talking about advocating and we're talking about business. And that's kind of the two main things we talk about. On Tuesdays, the Tuesday episode is going to be about advocating in some capacity. So whether that's about self-care or some specific aspect about being special needs parent, talking about alternative healthcare things, all that stuff is going to be more on Tuesdays. And then on Fridays, we're going to talk about business. We'll be sharing business stories, and I have some consultants booked to come on the podcast to talk about things. I don't want to give anything away just in case we have reschedule or cancel or anything, but some really exciting episodes coming up where we talk with some experts in the field about some very practical problems for business owners that we've actually even talked to on the show. So really excited about those episodes coming up. Also have some other exciting experts that we're going to be talking to about alternative healthcare and even more that I'm searching for. So also specifically on that topic, if you want to submit any questions about advocating an alternative healthcare, so like looking for other options, looking for second opinions, if you have questions about that, if I can't answer them, then I'll find an expert and we'll play your question to address those questions specifically. But please send me voice memos about those questions as well. Maybe we'll do like a question and answer episode specifically, or I don't know, we'll figure that out. But please tell me your questions, and I want to help. I want this to be a valuable, helpful podcast for you. I think that about wraps it up. If you have found this podcast to be helpful or inspiring in some way, would you take a screenshot of it and post it maybe to your Instagram stories and tag some friends that you know would love it, or maybe shoot them a text message and say like, oh my gosh, you just listened to this episode. You have to hear it. They talk about this thing that we were just talking about yesterday. Share it with your friends, get the word out, because I really want this to impact the special needs community. And I can only do that with your help by sharing it to those mamas that can benefit from this podcast. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you on social media. Find me at Moms of Heart. This in the show notes. They're going to be at momsofheart.com/014. Goodness, are we already on episode 14? We are. momsofheart.com/014. That's where we're going to find the show notes, and all the resources to everything I talked about on this episode will be there. If you specifically want to find out about the education for real estate, or you want to talk about the Arbonne business opportunity, just drop me a message, because I don't want to have links and misrepresent anything. I want to be really sure that if that's something that you're looking at investing in, that it's really a good fit for you. I don't want you to spend your money on something that's not a good fit for you. So drop me a message and we'll chat about those things. Otherwise, the rest of the show notes are at momsofheart.com/014, or if you're on some apps, you can just scroll up or scroll down. Yeah, whatever. Come find me on social media. We'll keep chatting there. I'm going to stop rambling now. At Moms of Heart. I'll talk to you later, Mama.